What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Red Stream Movie Podcast, the podcast where everything is connected. I'm your host, Jacob Thompson, and joining me is my co-host, friend, and the person most likely to fall in love with a girl that doesn't actually exist, Alex Perkins. Perk, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's happened on many an occasion.
Yeah.
They made the show Catfish is inspired by my life.
Oh, damn. Wow. And you were pretty young back then, so that's even
Yep.
worse.
just a wee lad.
so unfortunate. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. This is the show where every week Perk and I review a movie connected to the last one we watched. If you like our show, we post on YouTube and podcast services pretty much every Friday. You can also follow us on TikTok if you want to see like some clip outs from the show. But yeah, if you like the show, tell your friends about it and come watch the movies with us. Last week we watched Ghost in the Shell, the landmark sci-fi anime movie. And this week we're watching Paprika, which our connection was Akio Otsuka, who played Detective Kogawa in this film. So Perk, why don't you intro it for us?
Yeah, all right. So Paprika is a 2006 joint directed by Santoshi Kon. It is a movie about dreams in a futuristic world where they have the technology to enter other people's dreams to use as a form of psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
But when one of the devices goes missing and things start to go awry, antics ensue.
Mm-hmm.
A couple fun facts is the movie Inception was inspired by this movie. I think that's fairly obvious.
Yep.
And this was Santoshi Kon's last movie before he passed away of pancreatic cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
I'll go first. Perk, this movie is batshit insane. Oh my god! Like I knew it was gonna be wild, but this movie is like Inception on acid and then on acid again. It's just absolutely nuts. I think like overall, I think the visuals are very cool, and I think the idea of like invading someone else's dream is very cool. And a lot of the just visuals stuff they do is really, really fun to watch. However, I felt it kind of lacking in just kind of the themes department. Maybe I just didn't pick up on it, but I was kind of like, why was this movie made? I saw it's based on a book. But I just didn't really get the full like message of the film. It just more seemed like, what'd be some cool shit we can do? Let's do cool shit. But there's not really a lot of like stuff underneath that is more kind of solid ground and like kind of some meat there. So yeah, I was entertained, but it gets absolutely like the climax is like, what the fuck is going on? And at the end, it's kind of like, I don't know if I got anything like emotionally out of that. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I agree with you where at the climax, I didn't really understand what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely bananas off the wall. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I think, I don't know, thematically I got just some, it's not too deep, just some basic, be yourself, hiding behind a mask,
mm-hmm.
living your truth, and yeah, it's not, there's not too much to that, but the mechanic of it, the entrance of dreams, all the animation
Mm-hmm.
surrounding that, a lot of the journeys of the characters to like find their inner truth through dreams is cool. Yeah, I mentioned it, but the animation is so awesome.
Yeah, it's
so
sick.
many spots.
Dude, when Dr. Chiba jumps over that railing in the dream and it goes back to real life, he's about to like jump off a building, like that was awesome. It was so
cool. There's so much, the animators get to have so much liberty with their designs because they get to spend so much time in a dream. And what is a dream? Are we in a dream now?
Yep.
Which a lot of that's echoed in Inception. You can see where that inspiration was taken from. But
definitely,
I was just enthralled. From start to finish, my eyes were stuck to the screen. I think I got more from this than I did Ghost in the Shell last week because there is so much going on. You could say there's maybe too much going on. But I didn't find it hard to follow at any point, really. And there's constantly something happening, whereas Ghost in the Shell is a lot more meditative. So yeah, definitely very different from what we watched last week, but I had a great time with this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just the opening scene of Paprika and Togawa in his dream is so just like attention grabbing and so fun to watch. And then that into the intro sequence of Paprika going around town and like jumping at people's t-shirts and like kind of appearing, disappearing. It's kind of like, hey, what's going on here? Is this kind of just a cool thing for the intro? And then it's eventually revealed that she doesn't actually exist. Like she's like an alter ego to Dr. Chiba. But that whole opening, the opening plus the intro, I think was just like amazing. One of the strongest openings of a movie I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. I like the credit sequence and the music behind it. Yeah, it's a good intro. It didn't take too long for me to suss out that Paprika was an alter ego of Dr. Chiba, but I think it was an effective plot device for sure. And yeah, right from the go, you kind of get the vibe of where the animation's gonna go. Like,
yeah.
You can tell already, like they can really take their freedom with this and get a little wild.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good precursor, I think.
Yeah, I think when we first see the parade, when the chief gets invaded and he starts spouting nonsense, and then he jumps out of a window, and they bring him in and they're watching his dream, and we see the parade and like the doll morphing into the assistant and all that. Like a lot of like the face stuff gets really fucking creepy. Like later when the bald guy, whatever, German, and what's his name, the traitor, Osani. They have like the two-headed thing going on, and like they're fighting with each other. It's like really kind of disturbing. And then I mean the fucking scene where Osani rips open Paprika is horrifying. Like holy shit. Like yeah, there is some like fucked up visuals in this, man.
No, I was gonna comment. I think that the horror aspects of this movie are really effective.
Yeah,
and there's so much about it that's just so unsettling, and it works so well. You're right, like the facial morphing and that all the stuff with the chairman and Osanai, when with their morphing and their roots and tendrils and stuff is so cool and so disturbing. I think the one like aspect of that stood out to me the most was the actual parade itself, because at face value, parades are joyous, happy adventures, but the way that it's portrayed, everything is so chaotic and so disturbed, combined with the way that they handled the score there. It's just cacophonous. There's so much going on. There's like almost like a carnival tune in the background, but it's just shrouded with all sorts of extra bonus noise.
Yeah.
And I thought that made the parade was like an impending doom.
Yeah.
And it was just so effective for me. And all the things on the float with the dolls' heads and the faces morphing. I really enjoyed what the scarier aspects of this movie. What makes it more of a thriller rather than just like sci-fi.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was just about to bring up the score because like it's so odd, and it reminds me so much of I remember me talking about the show Paranoia Agent I watched, which is Satoshi Kon's the one anime series he did. But the intro song for that is like very similar to the parade song in this, where it's like cheerful, but also there's just that disturbing undertone to it, and like kind of chaotic, and like the people are kind of just out of control. And I don't like it, and I'm not supposed to, like, as in like I'm disturbed by it, which I'm supposed to be. I feel the way I'm supposed to feel, I think, and it's very unsettling. So whenever like that track came on, I was like, oh, it's gonna be the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, definitely. You and I both, we have a pretty low budget when it comes to horror, but I think this one, it pushed all the right buttons. And it never got too out of hand, and I think part of that is the fact that it's shrouded behind the medium of animation, which helps. But yeah, there were definitely a lot of really unsettling moments, which really ratcheted up the tension,
Yeah.
especially when it needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking on the characters, I think this is where the film was a bit lacking for me, specifically with Dr. Chiba. Like we find out that Paprika is her alter ego, which is like interesting in and of itself that she has this like much more cheerful, kind of easygoing kind of persona when she's, I guess when she's dreaming, but also just dreaming with other people. I just needed, for me personally, I just wish we got a little bit more on why Paprika exists in the first place. Like you could argue like just her existing means that Dr. Chiba is kind of like repressed. But I just didn't get quite enough from her on just kind of her conflict. Because when she was like when Dr. Chiba was awake, she never seemed to like particularly depressed or like upset. She just seemed kind of cold, like a scientist, which like could have just been her characterization. The only line we get that indicates some conflict is that she says, somebody asks her about like her dreams or whatever, and she says, I haven't dreamt one of my own dreams in a long time. And that eventually is the like climax of the movie of her like having a dream of her own without Paprika, I guess. I just need a little bit more from her on how she got this way, or the fact that she was like struggling with this, as opposed to just kind of bounce between her and Paprika and just like, hey, there's two different people, but it's one person. It wasn't quite enough for me.
I thought there was enough there. From just what I could surmise. Yeah, I got big time themes of repression. She's very cold in the real world, and I think that's indicative. And you're right; it's a good juxtaposition with her Paprika alter ego, who's so bubbly and outgoing. I think it's pretty well laid out that she just towards the end we get to see she's just uncomfortable with what her inner self wants, which is she is in love with the Tokito. Thank you. And that I think that comes through. And I think you're right. It's emphasized by the line about I haven't had my own dream in years, because probably she's afraid of her dream and doesn't want to embrace it. So she built this barrier.
Or maybe she's just
separated by
always
an alter ego,
helping out patients and dreaming with them as opposed to like dreaming on her own.
So at like to avoid confronting her own self, she projects into everyone else. So yeah, it's maybe slimmer than it could have been. But I thought there was a decent amount of characterization for her. I thought she was a fairly strong character. I also thought that the police chief Kogawa was a really interesting character to follow as well. He's almost more of like the POV character, like the normal guy kind of going through it, and his little side story about him and his unresolved grief and regret over his relationship with his friend, I thought was a nice B plot, and I thought that resolved really well.
I totally agree. I really loved his story, and I appreciate we just like didn't like put it to the side or kind of forget about it. It was present and at a good pace, and then it was resolved at a good pace. Then he came and helped at the end. Like, yeah, I think he's probably my favorite character.
After getting over his own demons, he was able to help out. Yeah, I agree. I thought he was a fantastic character.
Yeah, I think the villains are fine. I think that, and this is another thing too, where I'm like, okay, because the chairman's whole thing is like science is invading the like sanctity of dreams, and that's where people can kind of be happy and not worry about the real world. Which I think is an interesting point. It was just, that was kind of it. It was kind of all surface level stuff. And
you can pick at that a little bit too. Like, obviously he's obsessed with the purity of dreams because, he can dream, he can walk again.
Yeah.
So with his idea of just turning the totality of the world into dream, he can have legs again,
right.
He can be whatever he wants. So I think a lot of the characterization is more implied, but if you pick at it, you can find it. I think you're right. I think he's he's definitely more of a skin and bones character than the others.
Literally.
But I thought he was effective as a villain.
Yeah.
I thought.
I mean, I personally thought Osanai was more threatening just because of the whole scene with Paprika where he has your pinned down and he's kind of
Unsettling for a different reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's just kind of losing it and he's very uncomfortable to watch and he's become kind of this pawn of the chairman. And that whole scene I thought was very effective. And I'm like, okay, I get this dude and I understand kind of where he's come from and I am afraid of him and I don't like him.
Yes. No, I thought that twist was pretty well handled, and very quickly they do flesh him out as bad guy. So I thought they did a fantastic job of showing that he's a super creep.
Yeah.
And painting him as the pretty much the primary antagonist, with the overarching antagonist, the chairman, almost being like a secondary.
Right. And yeah, I like there was two of them because like with stuff like this where there's so few characters, it's like, okay, well the bad guys be somebody we know. So which one is it? You know? But I like to think, okay, there's actually two. Like it's these two guys working together and it's not just like the typical like one of them is bad. And I thought like also the chief was like a nice little kind of sidecar character. He was fun and had good rapport with everybody, and he was just also kind of like a POV character a little bit. But I liked him quite a bit.
Yeah, there's not all that much that he ends up doing, but he's good in a supportive role. Adds some levity where it's needed.
Yeah. So very very interesting movie. I like you said, I like the mechanics of it. I was a bit confused. I mean, you can help me out with this. So when the detective was meeting with Paprika, he was meeting with her like online, and we just got a view as if he was in a restaurant or a bar, where he was actually like sitting at his computer.
That was my read on that. My read was that it was just kind of like a Sims type game, but he also did revisit that bar in a dream, so the lines were blurry, and I think intentionally so.
Right, because even with the two bartenders who like ended up helping out, I was like, are they real or who are these guys? You know what? Because they were like very helpful. They knew information that he didn't know, so I was like, what's going on with that? But a lot of this stuff is just like kind of it's cool looking at it. You don't have to pick up the mechanics of it too much. So I thought it was pretty good. I want a little bit more, but I think it's a very very cool movie. And I mean as far as recommendations go, obviously Inception, right?
So that's not even what the first one that would come to mind for me. I mean, obviously with similar mechanics and inspirations, but my first thought was to like the David Fincher thrillers, specifically Seven and Zodiac. Just kind of investigative thrillers. It was giving me a similar, the tension felt kind of in a similar vein, especially when Dr. Chiba's tracking down, what is it, Himuru?
Look at it quick.
And essentially,
you're close for sure.
Essentially finds out that like he's just a husk. What was him is gone.
Yeah.
That moment had it just reminded me so much of like a Fincher thriller, in a great way. So I would say, Inception's an obvious companion piece, but I think there are some great detective thrillers that would be paired well with a movie like this.
Sure. It was Himuro.
Himuro.
Yeah, for me, Inception, and I would say Paranoid Agent. I don't think it's as good as Paprika, but it's got similar vibes and like the music especially. And there's a detective that's very similar to Detective Kogawa in this one. So if you want kind of a similar type of mystery psychological thriller, check out that show. And then as far as like other anime that kind of feels like this, but it's not quite the same, I think Evangelion is kind of has a similar vibe, where just that show gets batshit insane at the end, similar to this. And it's a lot more high concept as kind of a general, but that might be something to check out if you want another very, very psychedelic kind of anime. It doesn't start that way, but it definitely gets there at the end. So, that is our review of Paprika. We'll be revealing what we're watching next week at the end of this podcast. But before that, it's bonus review time. Perk, you got nothing, but that's okay because I got a big one.
All right.
Can you guess what it is?
Did you finally watch Little Miss Sunshine?
Unfortunately, no, because I was too busy watching One Piece live action.
Oh, is that out? I
which
didn't
came
even
out
know.
this weekend. Yeah. So yeah, finally came out. It's 8 episodes, 1 hour each.
Okay.
And I'm very thankful. It seems to be doing very well. Like it was
Good.
number one Netflix. People are watching it. People are enjoying it. I've seen people online saying that they started watching the original show after watching this because they liked it so much. So it's being successful, and I'm very happy about that. For me personally, I think it's solid. It's just not as good as the original, which of course it isn't. It never was going to be. So it's not. I shouldn't be that disappointed about it. I think I just have a couple kind of main issues. The first one is just the fact that it's condensed, right? So you have essentially, I think they condensed about the first 40 episodes of the anime into 8 hours, which is like a 50% time reduction.
Sure.
And to combat that, they moved some things around, which I think mostly worked. I think they were pretty smart about moving events around to make things happen a little bit faster. But I think where it kind of suffers is the emotional character, like payoffs and arcs. We get the same, character beats that we get in the original series, but there's way less time to develop them. So they just didn't really hit as hard for me. And I just wish we had gotten more time with the characters to kind of get those full payoffs. And that kind of happened for every single kind of character arc, except for I think the last one worked pretty well. And that's just a matter of time. And I think and this is also hindered by the fact that I've seen the original. So I know all this stuff already, and that's going to definitely affect things. So it seems like people who went in blind liked it well enough, which is good. Just for me, that reduction with the characters just wasn't fully working. Another issue I had was I liked when they did their own take on stuff, like their own interpretation of scenes and kind of changed things up a little bit. When they did like an exact replica of a scene from the anime/manga, it felt like bad cosplaying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's like there was one scene in particular where they copied all of like the lines and the poses from the manga, and it didn't work. I don't know. I don't know why it just takes away so much impact. Maybe it's for the fact that I just know it so well already, but I think for a lot of us, they should have just done their own version of it as a cool, just as a new take, because we've already seen that version. We don't need to see it again.
Right.
And I think overall,
it simply can't be as good.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that it's not animated means it cannot be as good.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. So, but overall, when they did interpret stuff, I think it worked. And yeah, so the last little criticism I have is I think, again, it's their new take on the characters. Two of the characters felt not the same character, and it made me a little bit sad. I guess I can say for who I think Garp felt not like Garp. And he was around way more in these arcs than he was in the original, like a million times more. I didn't love his characterization. I think he didn't feel like himself. And then Luffy, the main character, I think the actor did a pretty solid job. Inaki, I think they chose him because he just is very similar to Luffy, like as a person. I think his acting chops were a little bit less than everyone around him, which was noticeable at times. Which, is fine, but you kind of want your main character to be pretty solid with that stuff. And then I think just some of the writing for him just didn't feel like early Luffy. It felt like later Luffy, and moving some of those character moments for him up this far just felt kind of off to me. But overall, it worked. I just have my little nitpicks and gripes, but as far as like praises for the show, I think the production design was really good. Like all the sets are really impressive, and like you felt like you were the places you were. Like the ships all looked great, and the interiors of like all the buildings were really cool. And the costumes were overall like pretty solid. The makeup looked better than I expected. Like there's a group of fishmen that are antagonists, and they look weird in the anime. So it's like, how are they going to do this? And I think overall they looked pretty good. I mean, they looked a bit stiff at times with all like the stuff on their face, but that worked pretty well. And yeah, it's One Piece. One Piece is a weird ass world, and seeing it in live action is going to look a bit weird at times, but they did. I think this is the best we could have gotten, and I think it's good enough for people watching it. So the next question will be, how long does this go for? It's doing well enough that we're probably going to get a season 2, and they put in some Easter eggs for season 2 in this first season, but it's like the longer this show goes, the harder it's going to be to make, because the next character we get, and that would be next season, is Chopper, who is a talking reindeer that's a doctor. So how the fuck are you gonna do that? Like, it's essentially having Paddington in your show for the rest of the show. Like, it's gonna, if they don't do it practically, which practically could also be disturbing.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're gonna do it, but I will say though, they actually did as much practically as they could. So props to that. Like, all of the stunts and stuff were really practical. They did, had to do Luffy stretching when they had to, but like everything was very practical, which was appreciated. But how the fuck are they gonna do Chopper, man? Like, I don't know how. So unless they get a lot of money, we'll see. But I think we'll at least get one more season, which would be, I think, satisfactory. And then if they stop after that, it'd be fine. But yeah, I'm happy it's doing well. Happy people are liking it. And hopefully we get more One Piece fans. You never have too many, Perk. And yeah, one last thing I'll say is this did cause me to start rewatching One Piece from the beginning again to compare. And it's just so good. Maybe I'll rewatch the whole series. Who knows? I have
give it a go. It's a
so
quick rewatch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my weekend was checking out that show and playing a lot of video games, which I will not talk about here. But yeah, that is our podcast for this week. Next week, we have something a little special. So we're going to be watching Perfect Blue, which is Satoshi Kon's arguably most popular film besides Paprika. And it's actually in theaters for a limited time as a 25th year anniversary. So hopefully when you're listening to this, there'll still be some showtimes available for us. It's pretty limited, but you can go see it in theaters, and otherwise you can rent it. I think it's also on like AMC's streaming service, weirdly. So yeah, Perfect Blue in theaters for next time. But until then, thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye-bye.